wind whispered across the dried stalks of the harvested field as dusk settled over the remote village of Devan. Among the golden remnants of the season's final rice harvest, an old woman, Madame Lean, stooped low with a scythe in hand, cutting what remained of the straw into neat bundles. Her fingers, cracked from years of toil, moved steadily as she stuffed each bundle into a torn burlap sack. From the narrow dirt path at the edge of the rice field, a woman's voice called out, cutting through the cold air. Lean. It's getting dark. Come home. Lean looked up, squinting against the dimming light. It was her sister-in-law, Hoa, standing with a bicycle at the top of the field. Lean waved. Just a bit more, Hoa. This straw will do us good for the winter. Hoa sighed, stepping off her bike and wading through the shallow furrows. We've enough straw already. You shouldn't be out here this late. The winds are turning colder and this is no time to linger near the old burial grounds. Lean chuckled softly but said nothing. Together, they gathered the last of the straw and walked their bikes home, pushing past a crooked bamboo fence that marked the boundary of the village cemetery. The path narrowed, flanked by ancient graves covered in thick moss and wild vines. A faint scent of decay and incense clung to the air. Just as they reached the cemetery's midpoint, Hoa broke the silence. Lean, I heard from my husband, your family is planning to exhume your mother-in-law's grave next month. Lean stopped walking. Her gaze turned toward a large mound among the graves, a tombstone half buried under wild grass, where her husband's mother, Madame K, had been laid to rest 3 years prior. We've discussed it, Lean said hesitantly. But I'm not sure. Hoa frowned. Why? It's just a reburial. Or is it something else? Lean took a deep breath. Some of the elders whispered that it's a sealed grave, a ket mo. Hoa blinked. A sealed grave? You mean, one that should never be disturbed? Yes, Lean said. They say when we first buried her, it was just an ordinary-sized plot. But over the years, it's grown, swelling like the earth itself has been consuming something inside. And the grass, have you noticed it? Taller than any other grave. Dense. Vibrant, even in winter. Hoa nodded slowly, unease creeping into her chest. I always thought it was strange, but never said anything. And now you're saying this grave might be cursed. Lean didn't answer. Instead, her eyes fixed on the tomb, where the shadows now gathered deeper than the rest of the cemetery. A crow flew overhead, cawing harshly before disappearing into the skeletal trees beyond the fence. As the two women resumed walking, a sudden gust of wind blew past, lifting the hem of Lean's long skirt. Hoa shivered and muttered, "Let's just go. This place gives me the chills." That night, as the village lights dimmed and the rain began to whisper across tiled rooftops, Lean lay awake on a thin mattress beside her husband, Tam. Outside, bamboo wind chimes clink softly, and the flickering oil lamp by the window cast long shadows across the walls. Around midnight, the silence was pierced by a faint knock, barely audible, but steady. At first, Lean ignored it, thinking it might be the wind. But then came the voice. "Lean. Open the door. It's cold out here." The voice was old. Familiar. Hollow. It was the voice of Madame K, her mother-in-law. Lean bolted upright, heart hammering against her chest. She reached over to wake Tam, but he lay unmoving, deep in sleep. Another knock. Then another. "Lean. Open. Please." Swallowing her fear, she crept toward the wooden door and pressed her ear against it. Silence. Only the rain now. She backed away slowly, turned, and returned to bed. Just as her head touched the pillow, the door shook violently. Bang, bang, bang. She screamed and shook her husband awake. Tam sat up groggily, rubbing his eyes. "What's wrong with you, woman?" "I heard her. Outside. It was your mother's voice." Tam rolled his eyes. "You and your superstitions. Go back to sleep." But Lean couldn't. Even after the knocking stopped, her mind raced with images from the cemetery, of the overgrown grave, of eyes watching from the dark. As dawn approached, she drifted into a troubled sleep and slipped into another dream. This time, she stood in a field of white mist. Fog wrapped around her ankles like creeping vines. Ahead, a hunched old woman in tattered robes leaned on a cane, her back turned. Lean called out, "Excuse me. Where am I?" The woman said nothing. She stepped closer. "Hello. Ma'am." Still no answer. Finally, she placed her hand on the woman's shoulder only to recoil in horror. The flesh beneath her palm was icy and rubbery. When the figure turned around, her face was missing. No eyes, no mouth. Just a stretched, grotesque mask of skin. Then the voice came not from the woman's face, but from the air around her. "Do not unseal it." Lean screamed and fell backward. From behind her, headlights surged through the fog. A truck engine roared. She turned just in time to see it charging toward her. In the driver's seat was her son, Min, eyes wide in terror. The truck hit her. She awoke with a scream, drenched in sweat. It was morning. The pale morning light leaked through the wooden shutters of the house. Outside, the rain had turned to a fine mist, dancing gently over the quiet village of Devan. Inside the kitchen, Madame Lean sat hunched over a steaming cup of ginger tea. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from what she had dreamt again. She stared blankly out the window, watching droplets slide down the pane like tears. Her mind kept replaying the image of the faceless woman in the fog, the screeching tires, the impact of the truck driven by her son. A warning. Or something more. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the gate creaking open. The metal latch rattled lazily as someone stepped in. It was her son, Min. Tall, lean, and perpetually in a rush, he wiped the mist from his helmet and gave his mother a casual smile. "Morning, me. Sorry I didn't come by last night. I had a delivery run down south. Long trip." Lean looked up at him, her voice soft but urgent. "Min, sit down. I need to talk to you." He frowned. "Is it about the dream again?" She nodded. "I had another one. And this time, it was you. You were the driver. You hit me, in the fog." Min chuckled uneasily, reaching for a rice bun on the table. "Me, you've got to stop watching ghost stories before bed. This isn't a joke." Lean snapped, her voice quivering. "She warned me again. Do not unseal it." Min paused. His mother was not one to raise her voice. Ever. The lines on her face seemed deeper this morning. Her eyes tired. Haunted. "I believe, the grave truly is cursed," she whispered. "I need you to tell your father not to proceed with the exhumation." Min sighed, his tone turning more serious. "You know he won't listen. He's already set the date. Uncle Ben and the others are all coming this weekend. It's done." Lean lowered her head. "Then we're all going to suffer." That evening, Min rode to his aunt's house to deliver a message regarding the upcoming family gathering. As he turned onto the main road, something strange happened. The road twisted not in direction, but in feel. The mist became thicker. The trees on either side blurred into shapes that didn't seem entirely natural. Halfway down the path, his bike's headlight flickered, then died. Min stopped the bike and tapped the light. Nothing. Cursing under his breath, he reached for his phone. No signal. Just as he began turning the bike around, a figure stepped out from the mist. It was a woman. Old. Barefoot. Dressed in tattered black robes, soaked from the mist. Her long white hair was plastered to her face. Her eyes, clouded and sunken, locked with his. "Boy," she said in a raspy, almost musical voice. "Do not open what the earth has sealed." Min's throat went dry. "What? What did you say?" She stepped closer. Her feet made no sound on the gravel. "You are the blood of the one who defies the dead. When they rise, they will not distinguish your face from the sinner's. Then, as suddenly as she appeared, she dissolved into the fog like smoke scattered by the wind. Men jumped onto the bike and kicked the ignition furiously. The engine finally sputtered back to life, and he raced back toward the village without looking back once. When he returned home, he didn't tell his mother what happened. But that night, he couldn't sleep. And for the first time in years, he placed a protective amulet one his mother had given him as a child inside his jacket pocket. Meanwhile, word of the upcoming exhumation had spread. Some in the village nodded respectfully at the family's decision. Others shook their heads in disapproval. Old Man Tam, the village's retired gravekeeper, muttered as he leaned on his cane outside the tea house, "There are graves you bury with prayers, and graves you leave alone forever. That one, it breathes." The children of the village stopped playing near the cemetery. Even the dogs avoided the path that led through the overgrown thickets. 3 days later, the family held a private meeting at Uncle Van's home. Around the table sat the elders Tam, his 2 brothers, and their wives. The topic was serious: preparations for the grave relocation, timing, and rituals. "Let's not drag this on," said Tam firmly. "We'll begin at midnight, this Sunday. Just like Thay Thao instructed." One of the younger uncles hesitated. "Brother, there's been talk about Ket Mo. That her body may not have decayed." Tam scoffed. "Ghost tales. We'll light incense, perform the rites, and move her to a proper stone tomb near the temple. That's it." Madame Lean sat quietly at the edge of the room, listening. When the meeting adjourned, she pulled Uncle Van aside. "I want to go see a real thing. Not that loud-mouthed fraud Thao." He looked at her, surprised. "Why now?" "I need to call her spirit," she whispered. "I need to ask if she wants to be moved." That night, before dawn, Lean and her sister-in-law Hoa pedaled down the silent village road. The sky was still dark, and the air was bitingly cold. They arrived at the home of a reclusive shaman, known only as Master Din. His house was quiet, his altar simple, his demeanor calm. Unlike Thay Thao, he spoke little and asked for nothing in return. After lighting incense and chanting low for nearly 20 minutes, Master Din's voice suddenly changed. His eyes rolled back. The flame of the candle on the altar flickered violently. "She speaks," he said in a hollow voice. Lean's heart skipped. "What does she say?" The master's mouth moved, but the voice was no longer his. "You touched what should not be touched. I do not rest. I do not forgive. Leave me in the dark." The candle went out. In the suffocating silence that followed, the 2 women sat frozen. Hoa gripped Lean's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Master Din regained his composure slowly and exhaled deeply. You must not move her. The ground has claimed her. If you open the seal, blood will answer." He said no more. The day of the exhumation arrived. A large tent was erected at the cemetery. Several workers gathered, men hired from outside the village. Family members stood solemnly as incense burned and prayers were offered. At exactly midnight, the digging began. The soil was dry, unnaturally dry. The grave was deeper than expected. And then, just as their shovels hit something solid, a foul wind blew through the clearing. A low hum began in the ground. Then, one of the men cried out, "Snakes! There are snakes!" From within the grave, golden-scaled serpents slithered out, eyes glowing, tongues hissing. Chaos erupted. Men dropped their tools and scrambled back. One of the elders screamed, "Cover it! Cover it! Now!" But it was too late. The coffin lid cracked audibly as a long nail slowly pulled itself loose by itself. And inside, something moved. The moment the coffin's lid began to groan open by itself, the night air turned thick as if the cemetery itself had stopped breathing. The wind halted. The mist froze. Not a leaf rustled, not a cricket chirped. Everyone stood still. No one dared speak. Min, holding a flashlight in trembling hands, watched as one of the nails securing the lid of his grandmother's coffin fell to the side with a soft plink. Then another. Inside the half-dug grave, the sound of creaking wood filled the space. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an illusion. It was movement. From inside. The workers, who had been confident and dismissive just hours earlier, were now pale as sheets. One man muttered a short prayer and bolted from the cemetery, slipping on mud as he ran. Tim, Min's father, stepped forward. "Enough. This is madness. Close the coffin. Nail it shut." But the master of ceremonies, an elder hired to oversee the spiritual rites, held up his hand, voice shaking. You must not interfere now. If this is truly a Ket Mo, any interruption could doom the entire bloodline. What the hell is a bloodline curse? Men shouted, fear giving way to panic. We just came to move her bones, not to raise the dead. Then came a sound that shattered them all. From within the coffin, something exhaled. It was long. Wet. Like ancient lungs remembering how to breathe. And then, a whisper. So faint, yet so clear, all who stood near the grave heard it. Do not open. Let me sleep. Lean screamed. She spoke to me again. She warned us. She ran toward the edge of the grave, grabbing her husband's arm. Tim, please. Stop this. But Tim, gritting his teeth, barked an order to the remaining workers. Seal it. Now. The men hesitated, until Uncle Van, a skeptical brute who had always scoffed at spirits, jumped into the pit with a hammer. Enough ghost stories, he yelled. She's dead. And I'll prove it. He pried off the rest of the nails and lifted the lid fully open. What they saw inside turned the world upside down. Madame K lay perfectly intact. Not bones. Not decay. Her skin pale, almost translucent, as if she'd only passed away hours earlier. Her eyes were closed, her hands folded neatly atop her chest. A faint golden film coated her body, glistening like resin under the flashlight. And then, her chest rose. She breathed. Uncle Van fell backward into the soil, screaming. She's alive. Oh my God, she's still alive. No, the master of ceremonies whispered. She is not alive. But neither is she dead. Men could hardly speak. What is she? The elder's voice trembled. Ket Emo, a sealed grave. A spirit caught between two worlds. If disturbed, it will not rest until blood has paid for the breach. Suddenly, the sky roared. Thunder cracked open the heavens and rain poured in violent sheets. The tent above collapsed as everyone scattered. Lightning flashed, and in that moment, Men thought he saw her eyes flutter open. Back at the house, chaos continued. Lean sat by her grandson's bedside, dabbing his forehead. The boy, 5 years old, had fallen ill the night before the exhumation. His skin was cold, his lips pale. He had been babbling nonsense in his sleep. She's standing over me, the lady with no face, she wants me to go with her. Men burst into the house, soaked and breathless. Me. Don't let anyone near that grave. It's real. Everything is real. Tam stumbled in behind him, covered in mud, face contorted in disbelief and fear. Call the monk, or the priest, anyone. We have to undo this. But before anyone could react, the lights went out. All at once. Darkness engulfed the home. Then, the boy screamed. They rushed into the room to find him pointing at the ceiling. There. She's on the ceiling. They all looked up. There was nothing there. Or, was there? For a fraction of a second, they saw it, a pale shape curled on the wooden beams, long black hair hanging down, a face hidden in shadows. The moment their eyes adjusted, it vanished. The boy fainted. They brought in Master Din. By dawn, he had drawn protective charms across every door, sprinkled sacred ash on the floor, and burned offerings at the altar. It is not a ghost, he said grimly. It is a trapped soul. And now that you have awakened her, she is no longer bound by the soil. Tam asked desperately, then how do we stop her? There is only one way, Din replied. You must finish what you started. Complete the ritual but with reverence. Do not try to relocate her. Bury her again, as she was, in silence, with offerings and chants. And then, never speak her name again. Lean nodded. She understood. We will do it tonight. That evening, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast, casting a dull gray hue over the village. The family returned to the cemetery. The coffin was still there, open, untouched, as if time had frozen it. Together, they began the reburial ritual. They brought offerings of food, incense, gold paper, and a new silk shroud. Master Din led the chants. Lean wept quietly, whispering apologies to her mother-in-law, begging for forgiveness. As they lowered the coffin and sealed it once more, a sudden breeze passed through. Gentle, like a sigh of relief. But just as they finished covering the grave, a whisper swept through the grass. Blood has been spilled. The debt is not paid. Men turned to look at Master Din. The monk's expression had darkened. She's not done, he murmured. Someone must still pay. The grave was covered. The coffin sealed. The air remained still. But within the hearts of the family, silence had not returned. Beneath the soil, something ancient stirred, bound not by ritual, but by vengeance unfulfilled. 3 days passed. For a time, it seemed as if peace had returned to the house of Tam and Lean. The rain ceased. The child, Nam, stopped screaming in his sleep. Even the animals, which had grown restless in recent weeks, calmed. But only on the surface. It began with the mirror. One night, Lean walked past the hallway mirror and stopped cold. She had seen her reflection, but it hadn't moved with her. It stood still, lips slightly parted, as if whispering something. When she turned back, it smiled. And then it shattered. Min, who was sitting in the living room with a cup of tea, heard the scream and came rushing in. The hallway floor was covered in glass, and his mother was trembling, pointing at the shards. She smiled at me, Lean whispered. Not me. My reflection. They cleaned the glass in silence. The next morning, Min buried the pieces behind the house, muttering prayers under his breath. That afternoon, the cattle belonging to Uncle Van were found dead, an entire pen of them, collapsed in a pool of their own blood. No visible wounds. No signs of disease. Just lifeless, frozen bodies. The village healer, an elderly man named Bao, came to inspect the scene. This isn't natural, he said, kneeling beside a carcass. Their hearts burst. All at once. Men stood to the side, fists clenched. You think it's her, don't you? Bao didn't answer. He simply walked to the center of the field, drew a chalk circle, and burned sandalwood incense. When the smoke rose, it coiled unnaturally, spiraling like a snake. "Something is still here," he said. "Something that hasn't been satisfied." That night, Min had a dream. He stood in the cemetery, the ground beneath his feet soft and pulsing. The grave of Madame K was open again. Not dug but torn from beneath. Roots coiled out of the earth like veins, slick with something red. She was standing there. Alive. No undead. Her eyes were milky white, her skin drawn tight over her bones. She was smiling. "You buried me too late," she said. "Now I am neither spirit nor corpse. You opened the gate. And someone must close it." She raised her hand, and Min saw a bleeding wound in her palm. Blood poured out not onto the earth, but into it. The soil drank it hungrily. He looked down and screamed. His feet were buried. He was sinking. The roots wrapped around his ankles, pulling him under. When he woke, his sheets were soaked, and his feet were covered in mud. Real mud. Lean's health began to decline. She stopped eating. Her eyes were hollow. At times, she would stare at the garden for hours, murmuring words that made no sense. "She's in the earth," she whispered once. "But the earth is not enough." Tam, once so firm in disbelief, now avoided the cemetery road entirely. His face had aged 10 years in 1 week. One evening, Min entered his parents' bedroom to check on them. He found Tam standing over the bed, holding something in his hand. A photograph. It was old. A picture of Madame K holding an infant Min as a baby. There was something scratched onto the back, in faded ink, "My son will walk between two worlds." Tam looked at his son and said, "She knew. Even before she died, she knew you'd be the one to carry this." Min shook his head. "This isn't my burden." Tam's voice cracked. "Then whose is it?" Later that night, Min sat alone in his room, staring at the amulet his mother had once forced him to wear as a child. He hadn't believed in any of this. Not the curses, not the spirits, not the old tales of Ket Mo. But belief didn't matter anymore. Because the curse believed in them. He was about to lie down when the lights flickered again. Then went out. He stood still, listening. Scratch. 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 Something was dragging itself across the wooden floor slowly, deliberately. It wasn't in the room. It was above. In the attic. He grabbed a flashlight and crept into the hallway. The scratching grew louder. The beam of his light trembled as he climbed the narrow attic ladder. He paused at the top. Silence. Then. A face. Pale. Gaunt. Eyes black and hollow. Staring at him through a crack in the attic boards. Min screamed, lost his footing, and fell from the ladder, crashing into a table below. When he came to, his mother was kneeling beside him, calling his name. He sat up slowly. She's in the attic. They looked up. The ceiling above them groaned. The next day, they invited Master Din back to the house. He walked through each room, his face growing darker with every step. She is no longer bound to the grave, he said. She is inside the bloodline. Inside the house. The ritual failed. What do we do? Tam asked. What will stop her? The monk hesitated. She must be sealed again. Not just her grave but her name, her memory, her presence. You must perform the binding ceremony at the hour she first died. And you must offer blood. Blood? Min asked. Whose? Din looked at him. You are her blood. That night, Min prepared himself. He wrapped the amulet around his neck, burned the incense, and placed the offerings on the family altar. Lean handed him a knife. Just a drop, she said. Enough to open the path. As he sliced his palm, the candle flames trembled. Outside, the wind picked up. The earth heard the blood. And something began to rise from the grave once more. The hour had come. Midnight. The same hour she had died 3 years ago. The same hour they had tried and failed to unseal her from the earth. Men sat before the family altar, incense swirling in ghostly spirals around him. Behind him, Master Din traced sacred sigils in a circle of red ash. His parents knelt nearby, their faces pale, eyes sunken from too many sleepless nights. On the altar sat a black clay bowl. Inside it, a flickering flame danced, fed not by oil but by blood. Men's blood. He winced as the cut on his palm continued to drip into the flame, feeding it. The flame shimmered with colors that shouldn't exist: green, purple, even a silvery hue like moonlight on bone. Master Din's voice was low, rhythmic. Ancient. Not Vietnamese. Not any modern language. Lean held her breath. Then, the candlelight dimmed. The room grew cold. And from the corner of the altar table, she appeared. At first, just a shadow. Then a form. Thin, ethereal, dressed in the same burial shroud she had been laid to rest in. Madame K. Her face was no longer soft and grandmotherly, it was hollow, stretched, as if frozen in a moment of pain. Her eyes were vacant. Her hands, skeletal. She stepped forward silently. Men couldn't move. The blood in his veins screamed for him to run, but his body remained paralyzed. She looked at him. Not his face, but his cut hand. Then her mouth opened slowly, painfully wide. You gave blood. Her voice was dry. Cracking. Not enough. Lightning exploded outside the house. The windows shattered inward. The wind howled through the living room, extinguishing every candle but one. Men clutched the amulet on his chest, shouting, "Why? What do you want from us? We buried you. We gave you peace." Madame K's head tilted to the side. Her voice became layered like two voices speaking from one mouth. You unearthed what was sealed. You bled the soil. The debt is not just mine. It is ours. Suddenly, the shadows behind her began to move. Faces. Dozens. Some old. Some young. Some without eyes. Some with mouths sewn shut. They surrounded her like a silent army. Master Dinah's chant faltered. No. No, no, no. This isn't just a sealed spirit. This is an ancestral binding. She's not the only one trapped. Lean gasped. You mean, others? The monk nodded slowly. Your family line. This land. The grave was built upon something older. Something that claimed them all. The ground beneath the altar cracked. A sickly green light leaked through the wooden floorboards. Men stumbled back. What the hell is buried under our house? Dinah's face turned grim. A gate. They used her body to keep it sealed. Her burial was not for rest, it was a sacrifice. And you opened it? Suddenly, the flame in the black bowl surged upward, then went out. Everything went black. The shadows moved. And the walls began to bleed. Dark crimson stains spread across the plaster, dripping down like tears. From the kitchen came a low growl. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Uneven. Like hooves on tile. Tam grabbed a lantern and turned toward the sound. What stepped into view was not a person. It was a figure made of bone and hair, dressed in funeral garments hundreds of years old. Its face had no eyes, just a hole where a mouth should be. It screeched, and the lantern shattered in Tam's hands. Men screamed, pulling his mother toward the stairs. We have to get out. But Master Din shouted, no. You leave the circle, the protection breaks. You must finish the seal. Men turned back. What seal? It's already open. The monk opened his satchel, pulling out a scroll inked in blood. There is one way. The gate feeds on memory, on legacy. You must give it what it wants, the name of the first ancestor. Speak it, and you bind the curse to sleep once more. Lean's voice cracked. I don't know it. But Min, still clutching the photo from days ago, flipped it over and read the faded ink again. My son will walk between two worlds. Underneath it, barely visible, a name. Pham Ngutrak. Min looked up, eyes wild. I found it. Master Ding grabbed a knife, slashed the air in front of the altar, and drew a sigil in blood mist. Say it. Say it now. Min shouted the name. Pham Ngutrak. The wind screamed. The shadows convulsed. The floor cracked and the green light flared up one final time, then imploded into a burst of darkness. And silence returned. When the sun rose, the house was a ruin. The walls charred. The roof splintered. The altar broken in half. But the grave outside remained untouched. Madame K was not seen again. Nam, the boy, woke up that morning for the first time in days smiling. But Master Din, pale and trembling, warned them. It is sealed. For now. But the gate still breathes beneath your land. And every drop of blood shed here, it remembers. Weeks had passed since the sealing ritual. Or rather the temporary seal. The village of Devan had quieted, but the calm was fragile, like mist over a stagnant pond. Beneath it, something still stirred. Min had returned to his usual delivery routes. Every trip on his motorbike through the old trails now felt different. Trees leaned inward. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. Sometimes, when he stopped at red lights in neighboring towns, he caught glimpses of pale women in his side mirrors. When he turned around, there was no one there. At home, things weren't better. His father Tam had taken ill. What began as fatigue turned into complete paralysis on the left side of his body. The doctor from town diagnosed it as a stroke, but the local healer disagreed. He's not sick, said old man Bao, placing dried mugwort on Tam's chest. He's being ridden. By what? Min asked. The matriarch, the old man whispered. She is punishing the blood. Lean refused to believe it at first. But every night, she saw her husband's mouth twitch, whispering words that didn't belong to him. Once, she leaned close and heard it. I told you not to dig. And the voice wasn't his. Nam, the child, had recovered physically. He played in the courtyard again, chasing a wooden hoop and laughing with his cousins. But sometimes, he would stop suddenly and stare at the corner of the garden. What are you looking at, sweetheart? Lean asked gently. The lady under the mango tree, he said, pointing. Lean followed his gaze. Nothing was there. She has no feet, Nam added. Lean's skin crawled. Later that evening, Min dug at the foot of the tree. Beneath the roots, he uncovered a rusted bangle, the kind worn by Madame K when she was young. How did this get here? He murmured. There was no answer. Only the creaking sound of the mango branches swaying in windless air. 3 days later, tragedy struck. Uncle Van's house caught fire. It started in the middle of the night. The entire southern wing burned down before the neighbors could reach it. He escaped with burns across his arms, but his wife didn't. She had been sleeping near the ancestral altar. The firemen said it started from a candle. But Lean knew better. She was the only one, she whispered to Min, who laughed during the exhumation. Said ghosts don't scare her. Min nodded solemnly. The curse chooses. Fearing further loss, Min sought out Master Din again, but the shaman had disappeared. His hut was empty. Dusty. No trace of a struggle. Just a single scroll left on the altar table. Min unrolled it. It was a family tree, his family. His great-grandfather, great-uncles, cousins. But some branches were burned. Blacked out in thick ink. Their names. All of them had died young. In strange, tragic ways. And all of them had been present at a grave unsealing. At the very bottom, one name had been written and then hastily scratched through. Min. Underneath it, in tiny blood-red strokes, one last root must be cut. Min froze. What does that mean? He whispered. But deep down, he knew. The next day, Lean found a dead pigeon on their doorstep. Its eyes had been plucked out. A piece of old parchment was tied to its leg. It read, "The soil has not forgotten. The debt remains." That night, Min had another dream. He was back at the cemetery. But it was no longer quiet. Thousands of graves stood open. Fog slithered between the tombstones like snakes, and the air was filled with a deep, rhythmic drumming like heartbeats from underground. From the largest grave, something crawled out. Not Madame K. Someone, older. Her face was veiled. Her body thin and dry, wrapped in ancient burial cloth from centuries ago. She looked at Min. Her voice was not human. "You awakened us." Min dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "There is no sorry in blood." She raised her arm, and from behind her, dozens of hands burst from the ground. Grasping. Clawing. Pulling. Men screamed as they dragged him down. He woke up in a cold sweat. But this time, his hands were covered not in sweat, but in dirt. He went to the village archives. There, in a sealed drawer beneath moldy birth records and temple donations, he found an old folk tale titled, The Buried Gate of Fu Le. It told of an ancient noblewoman, Lady Le, who was buried alive as punishment for occult practices. Her tomb had been sealed with 12 sacred stones, blessed by monks from the capital. Legend said, if all 12 stones were disturbed, her spirit would rise again, dragging her descendants into the void with her. Men did the math. They had dug up the 12th stone when they moved Madame K. Madame K. was just the last lock. Lady Le had returned. He ran home. But it was too late. Nam was gone. Lean was collapsed on the kitchen floor, whispering her grandson's name. A trail of tiny muddy footprints led out the door straight toward the cemetery. The night air was heavy with fog as men sprinted through the narrow village paths, clutching a lantern whose flickering light barely pierced the thick darkness. Every step echoed loudly in the silence, yet it felt like unseen eyes were watching his every move. Nam was gone. Lean's desperate whispers haunted him, her voice still echoing in his ears, find him before it's too late. The muddy footprints led him to the edge of the ancient cemetery, the place where the boundary between the living and the dead thinned like a veil. The graves here were older, moss-covered, some toppled by time or unseen forces. The air smelled of earth and decay. As men crossed the threshold, the temperature plunged sharply, breath misting in the frigid air. The flickering lantern cast shadows that danced unnaturally on the gravestones. Something was wrong, more than just the missing boy. Suddenly, the ground beneath his feet shifted. The earth trembled softly, then violently. A low, guttural growl emanated from the soil. Men froze. Before him, the largest tomb, the one that belonged to Madame K, began to crack open, seams glowing with an eerie green light. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat. From the fractured stone, roots as thick as a man's arm burst forth, twisting and writhing like serpents alive. They clawed at the air, seeking, searching. Men's heart pounded as a spectral figure emerged, Lady Le, the ancient noblewoman bound beneath the soil. Her eyes burned with cold fire. Her voice was a whisper carried on the wind. You called me. Now, you belong to me. Desperation took hold. Men yelled into the void, Nam. Where are you? A faint giggle replied. He followed the sound deeper into the labyrinth of tombs, the roots and shadows seeming to close in on him. Every step was a battle against the unseen forces pulling at his soul. Suddenly, a pair of small hands grabbed his ankle. Min fell to his knees, heart racing. Uncle Min. Nam's voice trembled. He looked down to see his grandson's pale face, eyes wide with terror. Come, Nam whispered urgently. We must hurry. But as Min helped him up, the ground shifted violently again. The roots lashed out, wrapping around Nam's legs. "Let me go!" Min shouted, pulling with all his strength. The roots tightened. Nam's cries grew louder. The spectral Lady Le appeared again, reaching out with skeletal hands. "You cannot save him." In that moment, Lean's voice rang out through the cemetery. "Nam. Come to me, my child. I will protect you." A warm light suddenly spread from Lean's hand, illuminating the darkness. The roots recoiled as if burned. Min felt a surge of hope and pulled harder. The roots snapped, and Nam collapsed into his arms, gasping for breath. But their escape was far from over. The Lady Le's scream pierced the night as the ground swallowed her again. "Your blood shall seal the curse. The debt is never paid." The family gathered back at the house, shaken but alive. Master Din arrived, gravely serious. "The seal weakens. The curse feeds on fear and blood. You must find the 12 stones that bind Lady Le's spirit. Only by restoring them can you hope to end this." Min nodded, determination burning in his eyes. "I will find them. No matter the cost." The village of Devan lay under a thick shroud of fog, the kind that swallowed sound and blurred shapes into ghostly forms. Min felt the weight of the village's silence as he rode his motorbike down the winding dirt road, the faint glow of lanterns flickering here and there like lonely fireflies. His heart pounded not just from the ride, but from the dread that had settled in his chest ever since Nam had disappeared. Nam, his little nephew, the boy who had survived the curse so far, was now missing, swallowed by the very earth that bore their family's dark secret. Min stopped at the edge of the cemetery, where the air grew colder, and the earth beneath seemed to pulse with a living rhythm. The overgrown gravestones loomed like sentinels watching his every move. He dismounted and took the small lantern from his bike. As he stepped through the broken gate, the faint scent of incense and damp earth filled his nostrils. The soft glow of the lantern barely illuminated the ancient stones, many worn by time and covered in thick moss. The footprints he'd been following led him deeper into the cemetery, towards the largest grave, the grave of Madame K. It was here that everything had begun, and perhaps here that everything would end. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet. A low growl, like the rumbling of an ancient beast, echoed from the soil. The gravestone slab began to crack, veins of eerie green light coursing through the fissures like molten glass. Roots, thick and sinewy, erupted from the cracks. They writhed and twisted, clawing at the air like serpents hungry for prey. From the glowing fissure rose a figure tall, pale, and clad in tattered funeral shrouds. Her eyes were burning embers, filled with millennia of rage and sorrow. Lady Le. Min's blood turned cold. "You called me," she whispered, voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "And now, you belong to me." The roots surged forward, reaching for the boy's small form. "Nam!" Min shouted, dropping to his knees. Hold on. Nam's pale hand grabbed Min's ankle. His eyes were wide with terror. We must run. The boy gasped. Min pulled with all his strength, but the roots tightened their grip. From the edge of the cemetery came a voice, soft, trembling, but filled with fierce love. Nam. My child. Come to me. I will protect you. Lean stepped into the circle of eerie light, holding a glowing amulet. The roots hissed and recoiled as the amulet's light spread. With renewed strength, Min tore Nam free. The ground groaned as Lady Le screamed, a sound of ancient wrath. You cannot escape the debt of blood. The spectral figure vanished beneath the earth once more. Returning home, the family's relief was short-lived. Tam's health worsened. His body was ravaged by paralysis, but his eyes burned with unyielding will. Lean spent nights whispering prayers, clutching Nam close. Min, meanwhile, pored over ancient texts and the village's forgotten lore. He uncovered a map, leading to 12 stones scattered across the region, the seals that bound Lady Le's spirit. But each stone was guarded by traps and curses, remnants of a dark age. To save Nam, to save themselves, men knew what he must do. He must face the shadows. The morning sun cast long, pale shadows over the village of Devan, but Min felt no warmth. His mind raced as he gathered the fragile fragments of the village's ancient history, clutching the brittle map that promised salvation and doom. The 12 stones, scattered across forgotten temples, deep forests, and haunted ruins, were the only hope to bind Lady Le's restless spirit and save Nam. His first destination was the ruins of Temple Van Lin, hidden deep within the Kam Sun forest. The elders warned the forest was cursed. Many had entered, none returned. Men rode into the forest, the air thick with mist and the scent of moss. The trees loomed, ancient and silent. Strange whispers rustled in the leaves. Every step forward felt like crossing deeper into another world. Suddenly, a shadow darted across the path, a figure in tattered robes, eyes glowing faintly. Turn back, child of blood, it whispered. The stones are guarded by the spirits of the betrayed. Min's heart pounded. He tightened his grip on the map and pressed forward. Inside the temple ruins, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of incense and decay. The walls were carved with images of tortured souls, locked in eternal struggle. The first stone was said to lie beneath the altar, protected by a deadly trap. Men carefully stepped onto the altar platform. The ground shifted. Suddenly, spikes erupted from the floor. He leapt aside just in time, rolling to safety. But the temple was alive. Ghostly figures appeared, faces twisted with rage, whispering curses in forgotten tongues. Men clenched his amulet, whispering prayers as he dodged specters. Deeper into the temple, men found a hidden chamber. At its center lay a smooth, black stone etched with crimson runes, the first seal. As men reached for it, the room shook violently. The ghosts wailed, and the runes glowed brighter. He snatched the stone, heart racing, and fled the temple as it began to collapse. Back in the village, Lean and Tam struggled to protect Nam from the spreading curse. Strange phenomena haunted their home, shadows flickering in mirrors, whispered voices calling from empty corners, and cold spots that sapped warmth and hope. One night, Nam woke screaming, pointing at a shadow in his room. "It wants me," he cried. "The lady without feet." Lean wept, holding him tight. Min's quest had only just begun. The stones awaited, each guarded by horrors older than memory. He would face spirits, curses, and perhaps his own darkest fears. Because if he failed, Lady Les' curse would consume them all. The sun had barely risen over the misty hills when Min prepared to leave for the next destination on his perilous quest, the abandoned village of Phong Van, where the second stone was said to be. Hidden beneath the ruined pagoda. The villagers spoke in hushed tones about the place, warning of restless spirits and the weight of forgotten sins. Min packed his bag with essentials, incense, offerings, the amulet that had protected him so far, and the brittle map inked with cryptic symbols. As he approached Phong Van, the air grew heavier. Trees leaned over the narrow paths like bent backs, and the silence was suffocating. Crossing the threshold of the ruined pagoda, Min felt a chill run down his spine. The stone statues lining the path were broken, faces eroded by time, but their eyes seemed to follow him. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of incense long extinguished. The floor was cracked, and strange symbols were etched deep into the stones. Min noticed a faint glow emanating from beneath a pile of rubble in the far corner. He carefully cleared the debris, revealing a small alcove carved into the wall. Inside lay the second stone, dark as obsidian, inscribed with swirling glyphs that seemed to pulse faintly. Suddenly, a whisper echoed through the chamber. "Leave. Or suffer." Min froze as the shadows around him began to move. Ghostly figures emerged, silhouettes of villagers long dead, their faces twisted in sorrow and anger. One stepped forward, a woman draped in tattered robes. "You dare disturb our rest." Min swallowed hard. "I seek only to bind the curse that plagues my family." The spirit's eyes glowed red. "You carry the blood of the betrayer." The spirits lunged. Min dodged, clutching the amulet. He recited the prayers Master Din taught him. The spirits screamed, retreating into the shadows. Min grabbed the stone and fled, the pagoda trembling behind him. Back home, Lean's condition worsened. She drifted between consciousness and fevered dreams, whispering warnings of the curse spreading like wildfire. Tam's paralysis remained, his face etched with pain and despair. Nam, haunted by visions of the lady without feet, refused to sleep. Min knew time was running out. The stones were not just keys but anchors. Without them, Lady Les' wrath would consume everything. He vowed to continue, though each step drew him closer to darkness. The days grew shorter and the shadows longer as Min prepared for the journey to find the third stone hidden beneath the ancient burial grounds of Lam Ha, a place whispered to be cursed by generations of villagers who dared not enter after dusk. Lean's health was fading fast. She spent hours staring at the old family altar, murmuring prayers to ancestors long forgotten. Tam remained bedridden, trapped in his failing body but trapped no less by the invisible chains of the curse that clawed at their souls. Nam was restless, his eyes haunted by visions of the lady without feet. Min, burdened but determined, set out with only his will and the weight of his family's fate on his shoulders. The road to Lamha was treacherous, winding through dense forests where the air was thick with the scent of decay and the sound of unseen creatures moving just beyond the edge of sight. Upon arrival, men found a burial ground overrun by wild weeds and twisted roots, nature reclaiming what man had long abandoned. The ground seemed alive, pulsing faintly beneath his feet. He located the burial mound marked on the map, an ancient tumulus crowned by a crumbling stone marker. As he cleared the debris, men noticed faint carvings along the stone, symbols of protection and warnings, etched centuries ago to guard something beneath. Digging cautiously, men unearthed a weathered wooden box bound with rusted iron. He pried it open to reveal the third stone, smaller than the others but glowing faintly, humming with an eerie energy. Suddenly, the earth trembled violently. From the shadows emerged a figure, a man cloaked in darkness, his face hidden but eyes gleaming with cold malice. "You disturb the resting place of the forgotten," the figure hissed. "The debt you seek to pay was sealed with blood and betrayal." Men stood his ground. "I seek to end the curse that haunts my family." The shadow smiled cruelly. "Then you will face the price." The air turned frigid as the shadow lunged, wielding a spectral blade that cut through the mist. Men dodged, using the amulet to deflect attacks. The battle was a blur of light and shadow, ancient curses and desperate prayers. With a final surge of strength, men thrust the third stone into the earth, chanting the binding incantation. The shadow screamed and dissipated like smoke. Exhausted, men returned to the village, but the price had been paid. Nam fell ill, his body racked by fever and unseen torment. Lean, frail and fading, confessed a secret, long buried, a truth about the origin of the curse. Generations ago, an ancestor had broken a sacred oath, disturbing a powerful spirit that vowed revenge on all descendants. The 12 stones were placed as a barrier, but now the seals weakened, the curse stirred. Men's resolve hardened. He would find all 12 stones, restore the seals, and protect his family even if it cost him his own soul. The night sky over Devan was an abyss of stars, but beneath that tranquil canopy, a storm was gathering, one born not of weather, but of ancient grudges and restless spirits. Men sat in the dim light of his small home, his fingers tracing the faded ink of the family map. Only 5 stones remained to be found, the seals that could save or doom them all. Lean lay nearby, her breath shallow, whispers of old prayers slipping from her lips. Nam's illness worsened. His small body was gripped by shadows even daylight could not banish. That evening, as the village slept, a chilling wind swept through the valley. From the cemetery came a low wailing, neither human nor animal, but something far older. Men's resolve hardened. He gathered his belongings, preparing to face the final stones, scattered in places no living soul dared tread. His first destination was the Forbidden Marsh, a sprawling wetland shrouded in fog and legend. Locals claimed the marsh was haunted by spirits of those wrongfully buried, their souls trapped by betrayal and blood. Men entered cautiously, the cold water rising to his knees. The air was thick with mist, and every step felt like sinking deeper into a nightmare. Suddenly, the water around him churned. Faces appeared beneath the surface, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths silently screaming. Men held the amulet high, chanting prayers to keep the spirits at bay. Ahead, a small island broke the water's surface. Upon it stood a lone stone pedestal. The sixth seal. As men stepped onto the island, a figure rose from the murky water, a woman clad in funeral robes, her hair drifting like kelp in the dark water. Her eyes were black pits. "You trespass," she hissed. "The blood you carry is stained with lies." Men steadied himself. "I seek only to save my family." The spirit's laugh was a bubbling gurgle as she lunged forward. Men dodged and struck the pedestal, grasping the sixth stone. A violent ripple shook the marsh. The spirits wailed, receding into the depths. Back in the village, Lean's condition became critical. Her voice weakened, but her warnings grew urgent. The curse. It knows no mercy. Tim, though paralyzed, mustered strength to speak. "You must finish what was begun." Men's journey continued through shadowed forests, forgotten temples, and ruined shrines, each stone guarded by spectral wrath and deadly traps. Each encounter tested his courage, his faith, and the very bond of his bloodline. As he gathered the stones, whispers of betrayal echoed through his dreams. A hidden history unfolded, ancestors who had deceived and destroyed to bind Lady Les rage. The curse was not just punishment, it was a legacy. With 7 stones left, men knew time was running out. Nam's illness was a mark of the curse's growing strength. The final battle between blood and spirit was approaching. End of chapter 11. On Banthay the now. Men se type tuc viet hoi 12 ba kak hoi k type. Teet lo sao han en hung by mat gia toc va de kachawien len din diem. Noiok cho men byet not on ban. Banda noi. Kachawien dang dan hap dan len roi, min kung type tuc en he on ban, no the men he otin teet moi dan han en he. Chat GPT de noi. OK on ban, min type luon boy chapter 12 roi de. Min se lam kachawien kang luke kang kwan, en he by mat gia toc. En hung mu toi ba en hung Thursday thatch kang now han, di tren 5000 ky2 en he. Chapter 12, The Veil of Ancestors. The village of Devan was no longer the peaceful hamlet men had once known. Every shadow seemed to whisper secrets, every gust of wind carried the sighs of forgotten souls. Lean's whispers had grown faint, but her eyes still burned with the knowledge of the past. One night, men sat beside her, tracing the lines of her weathered hands. "Tell me everything," he urged. With a shaky breath, she began to unravel the dark tapestry of their lineage. Long ago, the family had been guardians of a sacred relic, an artifact capable of binding spirits between worlds. But pride and greed corrupted the bloodline. An ancestor, blinded by power, betrayed the pact with Lady Le, sealing her fate and theirs. The 12 stones were not mere seals, they were fragments of that relic, scattered and lost to time, each holding a piece of the curse. Only by reuniting them could the family hope to sever the ties to Lady Le's wrath. Min felt the weight of this revelation heavy on his shoulders. The stones he sought were pieces of not just power, but history of sins long buried but never forgiven. As Lean's strength waned, Min prepared for the journey's final leg. He would face the darkest secrets, the oldest curses, and confront the shadows lurking within his own blood. At the stroke of midnight, Min found himself standing before the ruins of the forgotten temple, the resting place of the final 5 stones. The temple was consumed by overgrown vines and the silence of centuries. Statues of winged beasts stood guard, their eyes seeming to follow Min as he entered. Within, the air was thick with the scent of decay and ancient magic. Suddenly, spectral guardians materialized, warriors clad in tattered armor, weapons drawn. The battle was fierce. Min fought with every ounce of strength, wielding both blade and incantation. The temple shook with the fury of the spirits, but Min's will remained unbroken. Piece by piece, he retrieved the stones, feeling their power resonate through his veins. But with each stone reclaimed, the curse tightened its grip. Nam's condition worsened, the child slipping closer to the threshold between life and death. Lean's final words echoed in Min's mind: blood must be spilled. Sacrifice must be made. The debt demands balance. The story reaches its crescendo. The final stone remains hidden beneath the heart of the village. Min knows the ultimate trial awaits. To break the curse, he must face not only Lady Le but the darkness within his own bloodline. The village lay cloaked in an eerie stillness as Min approached the center of Divan, where the final stone was rumored to rest beneath the old banyan tree, the heart of the family's ancestral land. The air was thick with the weight of generations past. As he stepped toward the ancient roots, shadows seemed to coil like serpents around him, whispering old warnings. Min knelt and began to dig. The soil was cold, unnaturally so, as if it had forgotten the warmth of life. With each handful of earth, memories flooded his mind, visions of his ancestors, the betrayal that had bound Lady Le's spirit, and the sacrifices made to keep the curse at bay. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled violently. The roots twisted and writhed, forming spectral hands that reached for his heart. But Min was ready. Clutching the 12 stones, he began to chant the ancient incantations taught by Master Din. The stones glowed, emitting a powerful light that cut through the darkness. Lady Le's voice thundered, echoing from the depths of the earth. You seek to undo what is eternal. Min's voice was steady. Blood must heal what blood has broken. The spectral hands grasped him, pulling him into the earth. Inside the darkness, Min faced Lady Ellie herself, an embodiment of rage, sorrow, and betrayal. The final battle was not just of strength, but of spirit and forgiveness. In the depths of the earth, Min spoke words of peace and apology not just to Lady Ellie, but to all the forgotten souls trapped in the curse. He offered his own blood as a symbol of atonement and a pledge to restore the family's honor. The stone's light enveloped them, healing wounds unseen for centuries. Lady Ellie's rage softened, her form dissolving into a cascade of light and petals. The earth stilled. Min was cast out from the grave, breathing fresh air, the sun rising anew. Back in the village, Lean opened her eyes, the fever broken. Tam smiled weakly, able to move his fingers once more. Nam laughed, free from the shadows. The curse had lifted. Men gathered the stones and buried them beneath the banyan tree, planting new roots of hope. The family rebuilt what was broken, honoring both the living and the past. Devan flourished once more, a village healed. Title/Tuda. Whispering Roots of the Forbidden Grave, the haunting curse of Lady Ellie. Description/Mota. In the remote village of Devan, a dark family secret lies buried beneath layers of earth and forgotten sins. When Min's family disturbs the ancient grave of his grandmother, Madame K, they awaken a centuries-old curse sealed by 12 sacred stones, a curse bound to the wrathful spirit of Lady Ellie, a betrayed noblewoman trapped between life and death. As restless spirits rise and shadows consume the living, Min embarks on a perilous quest to recover the scattered stones and bind the curse once and for all. Along the way, he confronts spectral guardians, unravels hidden family betrayals, and faces the darkest depths of bloodline vengeance. Will Min succeed in sealing the curse and saving his loved ones, or will the debt of blood claim them all? A chilling tale of family, sacrifice, and the unforgiving power of the past.